Once again, thanks for joining. My name is Christina King, and I'll be the host for today's webinar. We have a fantastic group of participants tuning in today. Before we jump in, I wanted to go over a few quick housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets you can use. You can expand your slide area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can submit them through the Q&A widget. We will be moderating the questions throughout the presentation, so please ask them as they come up. We'll answer as many as we can at the end. If we don't get to your question in the live session, we will be sure to answer it offline. A copy of today's slide deck is available in the resource list. You can find additional answers to some common technical issues located in the Help widget at the bottom of your screen. As a last note, this webinar will be recorded and available to watch later on Jama's website. Today, we'll be reviewing the updates to Jama from the past year and sharing features and tweaks you may have overlooked. A little bit about me. I'm the Customer Care Supervisor here at Jama. I manage our technical support engineers and business support interns. I also oversee management of the Jama customer community. Now I'd like to introduce our presenter, Jess Stetson. Jess is the Product Marketing Manager for Jama Software. She's a certified Scrum Master and Scrum Product Owner with extensive experience in systems engineering, business analysis, and technical sales. In addition, Jess has a deep understanding of the medical device and life sciences industries, working with Jama prospects and customers as a solutions architect, recommending process improvements to achieve traceability. And with that, I'll hand it to you, Jess.
Thanks so much, Christina. And you guys, I'm really excited to be here today. I've been looking forward to this webinar for a couple of weeks now, actually, and it's fun to be able to take you through what it is we built over the last year, really define the whys of what got us there, and I think we're going to cover a lot of that today. I do intend to cover some main buckets here. First, key themes. So I want to make sure that I can set the stage so you understand where our heads are at as we did our development over the past year and as we continue to develop in the future. We will dive into the features, so give you a nice demonstration of that. And I'll also talk about some architecture updates. So especially if you are looking at our on-prem option, some of those should be really helpful for you as well. I'm going to hold questions until the end. That being said, as Christina said, feel free to type them into the box if you do have any questions, and we'll make sure we address them toward the end of our time here together today. So let's go ahead and start with some of our key themes. And the first one that comes up for us is we want to continue to strengthen our core feature set. So first and foremost, we know what you love and we know what you use every day in Jama. We see it in our community. I hear it when I talk to people on the phone. We also know, though, from those forums specifically, where we could improve. So really the main theme you'll see throughout this discussion today is the focus on our core feature set. Review Center, Reading View, working with and analyzing data. We want to make that easy and clean and continue to strengthen those features that you use every day. That's always going to be a focus for us here at Jama. Second, our goal is to really consistently stay a step ahead of your demand for availability and concurrency, both in the hosted environment and in the on-premises environment. So as a result this year, we continued our focus on improving Jama for our enterprise customers. So part of this included progressing Jama's services-oriented architecture. We broke up some of those application pieces into discrete application services so we could ensure stability and performance for you guys, for our customers, right? These microservices are invisible for you, but they do increase the performance of our application exponentially. So especially if you went from like a 2015.1 or a 2015.2 into an 8.x, you definitely saw the changes as we started to break out some of those services. We know, though, that scale and performance are never quite good enough, so we're going to continue to dig into making the application more efficient and able to handle more people, more data, and more exchange of information between Jama, and then also the other applications you're using to continue to make product development your competitive differentiator. Now finally, with a nod to our hosted customers and those of you potentially looking to make the move to hosted, we refocused on our hosted environment. So as we'll talk about momentarily, our Jama 8.x release provides a lot of improvements for our on-prem customers. That being said, we love seeing you in hosted. Our goal is to remove any barriers possible to migrate on-prem customers into the cloud environment. Specifically, we know how important data security is to you and your customers, and we continue to keep data security and privacy as top of mind. So we performed vulnerability scans and penetration testing. We made resultant updates to our system and our architecture. We also defined safety and performance as every team's responsibility, and I really mean that. So everybody from engineering to product to sales, when they come on board, I talk to them about how this is a big focus for them and a big focus for our customers, and we want to keep it top of mind. And that really reinforces quality as a part of our development process. So this work obviously helps retire future risk for you, our customers, as we advance security, we certify and maintain compliance to industry-recognized processes and protocols, and we also refactor some of our code. If you're interested more in some of our security policies, we won't really talk about them today. I encourage you to visit our trust site at trust.jamasoftware.com, and that will give you into a lot of insight into what we actually undertake here at Jama to protect you and protect your data in the hosted environment. So now that we've kind of set that stage and we've talked about the theme, let's go ahead and move to our functionality updates. What's in the nitty-gritty? What has really changed during the last year? And the first thing I actually want to focus on is that while this might feel invisible unless you actually know to look for it, accessibility was really one of our big goals this year. We wanted to make it easier to navigate through the application. This is one of those things where once you start using it, you'll never stop. It's actually a lesson I learned when I first recognized the value. If you've been using Jama for a long time, you know that at times it's very mouse-driven, and we heard from you that there are a lot of clicks to get where you need to go and do what you need to do, so we were slowing you down. In addition, as you created content, you could not, in the application, easily check if the information you were creating was accessible to everyone, regardless of the technology being used. Now, with our accessibility improvements, you can navigate through the application using spacebar, tab, and escape in places like the home screen, single item view as examples. And our rich text editor now has an accessibility checker add-on to help you create accessible content. I'm not going to be demoing these accessibility improvements directly. However, I will be using them throughout this webinar to move through the application because, like I said, I've pulled them into my everyday workflow. So you will see me, or hear me rather, clicking around a little bit more on my keyboard as opposed to using my mouse. So for the first part of this discussion, just to transition, I really want to focus on TraceView. So we know that you need to show proof your product does what it should, and that's where traceability is involved. So if you're managing compliance or working with outside vendors, you're probably managing detailed documentation of what was built and why. This information, however, often lives in a silo. It's hard to access, which is a problem because this information is so key in describing how your product works, who built it, and why. It also tends to be very last minute. So I used to work in a highly regulated environment, and the traceability was usually something we had to do, and we usually did it as kind of a last minute fire drill before we took it to the board to get something approved. We definitely should have focused a bit more on it at the beginning, but when you're moving 1,000 miles an hour and it's something safety critical, which is what we were building, it's honestly really hard to prioritize because you want to get the thing out that can actually help save and improve lives. Honestly, also, there wasn't really a we involved. So our traceability was built by one guy who had access to our RM system. Nobody else did. And sitting down with him in the face of those ever-changing priorities, the new fire that was coming up from maybe a point of contact that we had, it wasn't something that could happen in the moment. And so that's the problem we really wanted to solve with the Jama TraceView. We wanted to make it easy for everyone to access the data. That TraceView is really a place where we see work being done. You can share views, configure the data so you're seeing the right information for the right analysis, build out traceability as you work, and make decisions in the moment. Traceability, we really feel, should be second nature, not an afterthought. So let's go ahead and take a look at TraceView and see how it helps actually solve those problems. And I'm going to go ahead and move to my Jama instance here. And if you've ever had a Jama trial, this will look pretty familiar for you. The Clear 3 hearing aid is a data set that we use quite frequently, and it is a part of our trial data set. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into the TraceView here. And you probably remember from before that obviously we had the Coverage Explorer under the traceability menu here, and that's something that was utilized a lot by our customers. They, however, you guys wanted something a little bit more actionable, something that was a little bit more easy to use, and that's where the TraceView comes into play. So what I'm going to do is I am going to head into my systems requirements filter here. This is the reading view, and if you are seeing this for the first time, I will talk about the reading view changes here in a few minutes, but obviously things have changed quite a bit there. What I want to do first, though, again, is address that trace view. So let's go ahead and look at what our trace view looks like. I'm going to minimize my Explorer tree here. The thing to remember is that we kind of look at this as a butterfly. So the source information, or the filter that I was just looking at, that lives in the middle. So from here, I can go upstream if I want to and look at the information that's related upstream. I can also go downstream, and I can do this to multiple levels if I want to, so I can follow that all the way down the path. If there's any maybe stories that I'm interested in learning more about, this is where I can select the item ID, and that opens up this pane on the right-hand side that will give me all of the metadata around those individual pieces of information, so I can get more insight into what is actually being talked about with regards to these specific items. We can also change the columns, which I really like. So maybe we're looking at our verifications here as an example, and we're interested in possibly looking at the test case status. That's something that we can add as a drop-down, so we have that additional piece of information. Or maybe we want to add some more fields here for user stories, so maybe status comes into play. We do have those pieces of information right here in front of us. The colors still show up. So again, it feels like Coverage Explorer, but it's a little bit more actionable, and I can move back and forth throughout as I want to. We can also fill in the gaps. So if I move back here to my source information, I know that this specific system requirement is missing coverage. So if I wanted to add coverage, I could come in and I could actually create that relationship, either by adding the relationship like maybe you're more used to by using this item explorer tree type thing on the right-hand side, or by adding a new related piece of information through the main view here as well. Now, the thing that I really, really love is that with the Coverage Explorer, if I wanted to share this information or get it out of the system, I kind of had to export that, right? That was the easiest way to do that. But here we can actually save this information if we want to. And so I'll just go ahead and call it maybe Jessica's system requirements. I'm a little bit selfish there. And then we'll go ahead and save it. So if I take the web link, that's something that I can actually just go ahead and save and share with somebody. I can also bookmark this information, and what that actually means is that the bookmark is saved to my home screen. So if this is something that I access relatively frequently, then I can go here to my system requirements, and then I can view that information just as I set it up. So holds on to the columns and that kind of thing, and all of the information fills in as is appropriate. So again, very accessible, very easy to use, and I love that I can share it with other people so they're looking at the same view that I have, and there's no confusion about maybe a column that they didn't understand was there that they needed to get information from, and that kind of thing. So that was Trace View, and now what we're going to talk about is Reading View. So this year has been a really big one for Reading View. So as one of our core capabilities, we knew that it needed some love, and there are some very specific requests that have come through from you guys that we wanted to make sure that we addressed. So our UX team earlier this year performed a bunch of research for us, and a couple of hypotheses we had about Reading View actually proved true. So first, it's been pretty difficult to understand and analyze information because of some maybe off, if you will, visual cues in the Reading View. And as much as we originally thought that List View and Reading View served two different purposes and thus could have different pieces of information in them, you actually were unable to get what you need from Reading View and wanted it to feel a little bit more like List View. So then came the big changes. Reading View is looking snappy, is what I'm calling it, because it just looks great. More document-like view, the removal of things like striping. So we used to have stripes that differentiated the different items, and that was confusing for some people. But the biggest changes come from one of our biggest requests, the ability to actually customize what you see in Reading View. This comes up so much that it was actually up again in the community the other day, and I got to respond to the person and tell them this is something that's actually available for you now. So let's go ahead and actually take a look at the new and improved Reading View. So I'm going to go back to the same set of information that I was looking at before here. We're going to take a look at these system requirements. And again, as I'm looking at them, you can tell that we have removed the striping. So it used to be this was light gray, dark gray, that kind of thing. And it really took away from that feel of something being more document-centric. there's a lot of information that lives on these individual items now. So if, as an example, I didn't want to jump into the trace view for whatever reason, but I wanted to understand what the related items were, I can click into and understand those related items. So looking at this one, adaptability maybe as an example, I can open it up this way and understand this information. Or if I want to take a deeper dive into the single item view, that's when I have the ability to click in and again see all those pieces of information. Something else I want to point out while we're in here, and this is something that I was super excited about because I'm a very visual person, is that now instead of just having the statuses, we also have the statuses and their associated color. So if you're like me and you're looking for that visual cue, that shows up not only in the list view like it did before, but also now in the single item view and also in the reading view as well. In the reading view, we also have comments that show up. So if any of these items here have comments, and I know I have a couple, I can select that and I can see where somebody's been at mentioned, if there are open actions and that kind of thing as well. Or I can add my new comments if that's important to me, so I can ask the appropriate questions after viewing the appropriate information. And I can also turn on and off fields. So if I'm looking at this and part of my analysis really isn't about the priority as an example, I can take that off. If maybe there were releases associated with this, or I wanted to understand when something had been changed. Again, it's easy to toggle on and off those fields. One that was requested quite frequently was the ability to see test steps in reading view. And so I'm happy to say that now when we look at the reading view for a set of validations as an example, I can pull up those test steps and actually see that information. So I'm hoping I'm getting quite a bit of cheer action out there because I know that's something that people were really, really excited about. The other thing that's really, really nice here is that this information will persist across sessions. So if I were to log out and log back in, the fact that I had viewed the test steps, that would still show up here. So I would still have access to that information and I wouldn't have to toggle on and off those fields again. And then also, just like list view, you have the ability to set the default fields. So if for a test case item, as an example, every time somebody viewed it in reading view, you wanted them to see the test steps and maybe the test case status, you could turn that on and have them actually able to view that information. So that's really nice as well because, again, you're getting everybody on the same page and everybody is able to kind of have the same touchstone where they're going to the same place, seeing the same information, and it just lessens the potential for confusion, which helps you, again, to move faster. So next what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Review Center. So our work in Review Center continues the focus on improving your ability to consume and act on information. We heard from you during our research sessions earlier this year that it's really difficult to focus on where feedback is specifically needed. And then once you find those areas, it's actually difficult to understand what changed. And so the updates we did this year seek to address this problem by allowing you, the user, to decide what differences you need to see. So maybe you haven't looked at a review for several versions now. You can actually compare between whatever versions you want to so you can understand what changed. And this helps your team deliver faster because there are fewer questions and more answers. And again, it's more easy to see where you actually want to direct your attention. So let's go ahead and head to our demonstration. And the first thing that I want to note is something that my PM for this is really excited about, where the reviews specifically, they actually very much made it feel and look more like reading view. So there's more of a similarity when you look at the two areas than there used to be before. So let's jump into our validations here. And again, reading through this, it looks pretty similar to what we were just looking at. Things are ordered a little bit differently. That was on me to change the order there. But again, I can read through, I can see the different pieces of information, and it feels familiar. So if I'm going back and forth between Review Center and the project view, I'm not getting confused by the change in visualization. The filters on the left are much cleaner. It used to be that the numbers were first, so you didn't have that quick visual cue to be able to see what it is you were actually looking at before you clicked. And so we just did some rearrangement. So I now know the latest activity is that, what's been updated since version 3 as an example. And it's very easy to click into that and see that information and then compare the view if I want to. So by just comparing with the prior, again, we've got the red and the green to indicate that something had changed. And then we also have added this compare view between all fields. So I'm going to go back to the review here and then clear out everything and then look at this comparison view. So if you're on-prem, you know that you don't actually have this yet, but with the release of 8.23, which is coming out this weekend, the first weekend in December, you will have access to this compare view in the on-premises environment and also in the hosted environment. And again, what it does is it very obviously shows you what has changed between a version. So in this case, version 3 to version 4. But if you're like me and you're not necessarily always on top of what it is that needs to change or on top of what review you're looking at, maybe you haven't looked since version 1 as an example, you can look at that as well and see the comparison between version 4 and version 1. So again, we want to make sure that you can look at the things that are really important to you because not everybody's going to be on the same page or on the same timeline when they come into the review. And so this just makes that information more actionable. So again, you can go through and you can improve or ask questions very quickly. And this differential view or this compare view actually applies to all fields within Review Center. So regardless of what's changed, you're able to see that very visually, very quickly. So now let's go ahead and talk about moving items. So in the past, the only way to really move information was to reuse it and then push it into another project or container. In one of our 2015 releases, however, we added the ability to move information. Some of the feedback we heard, though, was that you were unsure where the data moved to, and if you moved something accidentally, it was pretty difficult to unmove. Our improvements this year make that auditability piece much, much easier. So now we have improved notifications and activity stream information, and so you get better insight into where your information is moving and where to find it if perhaps somebody else maybe moved it, which we know comes up as well. So let's take a peek about what those changes in the move actually look like. And to do so, I'm going to move back into the projects here. And in moving back into the projects, let's say as an example, we are taking a look at our validations. And maybe we know that we want to move this Windows Mobile validation into the mobile folder here. And so again, it's just a drag and drop, but the difference is that we're going to see this view across the top that says, go ahead, it's moved from this location to this location, or maybe I actually want to undo this move because it wasn't something that I was excited about doing. I actually missed the ability there because I waited longer than 10 seconds, but you did see that undo move potential showing up there. If you move any containers, the containers and the children will go, and that information will show up in that drop down at the top of the screen, so you have insight into what actually moved and where. Again, you do have the ability to undo the move, so if I wanted to drop this Android validation here and just undo the move, it's pretty simple to actually move that stuff around. And then the other thing is that, again, if maybe somebody else moved the information, I can see that through the activity stream. So I could look at all of the activities that have happened. I can see the details of a move maybe with this hover over, so we know that a specific validation moved from one place to another. And then if I want to, I can view the moved item as well. So just click into that. And the thing that I really like about this is if maybe I moved multiple items. So let's say that I dropped the iOS and the Android validation here into this mobile folder. By looking at the activity stream, again, there's 2 items moved up here. But by looking at the activity stream, I can see that multiple pieces of information have moved, and I can actually view those moved items as well. So an entire list of them, if I'd maybe moved, 10 or 15 items, something along those lines, I don't have to individually click into each one of those to either see them or to undo the move. Now I want to talk about something that's also related to the theme of reuse. So sometimes you just need to move one item and you don't want to have to use the reuse engine to actually get there. So we wanted to make that easier for you too if you needed to be able to quickly reuse information, but just maybe one piece of information. So our duplicate functionality does just that. You can easily duplicate individual items, including their attachments, tags, and links. If you're often duplicating, your options save across sessions. So let's say maybe as an example, you duplicate validations quite frequently and you know that they have attachments, so you always select to include those attachments. That selection will continue as you move across sessions. So if you log on a Friday and you log in on a Monday as an example. I do want to make one side note, and that is that the duplicate item feature is limited to duplication of the item's name, description, test steps if applicable, and the ability to choose to include tags, attachments, and links. And specifically, we're excited to hear your feedback about what other fields you might want to include in the duplicate, but talking with our users, these were really the important ones and the ones that we looked at for right now. So let's go ahead and look at our duplicate item and our duplicate of information. And what I'm going to do is maybe duplicate this waterproof system requirement as an example. So it's just a matter of right-clicking to duplicate that item, and then we can go ahead and decide to maybe include attachments or links or tags. I'm just using my spacebar and my tab key here to select and unselect these pieces of information. And then again, I have the ability to press enter to duplicate that information. So there's the duplicate of waterproof right there. If I were to reduplicate it again, those pieces of information that I checked those boxes would actually save. And I can see that any tags came across as well. So that's really great if, again, you're trying to duplicate not only the information, but also the things that you've attached to the information. Anything that's available, so any little module that you have turned on, so tags, attachments, and links in this specific example, will show up. In my validations, as an example, I don't have any of those things turned on, so it's not going to add to the confusion by having the checkbox there for me to click to actually duplicate, an attachment, because it's just not there. So the application is smart in that way and does show you specifically what you have the ability to duplicate. So finally, what we're going to talk about with regards to functionality is let's talk about one of my favorite new features, because I'm a little bit of a math geek, and this one makes me actually pretty excited. So the creation of complex products obviously isn't just about writing the right requirements with words, right? The creation of electrical, mechanical, other products also require some complex math. And so to streamline working with mathematical or chemical requirements in Jama, we are introducing the Wirus Equations Editor. This is a third-party plugin, and it's for the creation of equations. So before the Equations Editor, creation of mathematical equations occurred often outside of Jama, and then they were copied and pasted, sometimes incorrectly or into the incorrect spot, into Jama, or maybe a screenshot was brought in. We also saw a lot of our customers actually creating these through the use of plain text in the rich text editor, and that left a lot of room, honestly, for misinterpretation. With the Equations Editor, however, equation creation becomes a part of the Jama process. So you can have confidence that the correct calculations are being performed and that you have clarity when exporting information to data sheets or anything else that you're trying to get the information out of Jama into another format. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Wirus Equation Editor in action. Now, the Wirus Equations Editor will show up in any rich text editor, assuming that you have access to the Wirus Equations Editor. So we'll go ahead and jump in here, and we can just go ahead and create anything we want to with regards to the math editor. So I'm just going to make up something here and maybe say 3/4 x, 3/4 s rather, plus, I don't know, the square root of 25. And you can see here, we're going to do 26 because we all know that the square root of 25 is 5. But this becomes more of an equation as opposed to something that you would have been able to put into Jama before. The other thing that I really like about this, honestly, is that it also has the ability to do the handwriting tool. So the handwriting tool, if you want to just draw out the equation, and this is actually the way that I prefer to do it when I have an appropriate mouse, is pretty cool, and that it allows me to just write out the equation here. And then actually put this information into my my rich text editor. So again, very nice if you are a part of an industry where you need to have these equations. We now offer this as a third-party plugin into Jama, and it's something that you can utilize. And if you're a prospect, it's available in your trial as well. So it's something that you can look at and play around with. So this concludes our portion of the functionality demonstration. What I want to jump to next are the architecture updates. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and take some questions. So first, let's talk about why did we update the architecture? So we actually performed the updated architecture update back in late last year, so maybe November, early December of 2016. But we still have a lot of customers who are now starting to move to the new architecture, so we wanted to make sure that we got a chance to revisit it. So Jama's new architecture provides performance and scalability improvements, a much easier upgrade process. So if you've ever tried to upgrade Jama, you know that that could be a bit hairy before our 8.x release, and definitely some lower IT overhead. So you get one-click updates to the application as soon as they're available. You can very easily understand how resources are being utilized. There's a really nice dashboard and more. And this also helps provide a better customer care experience because, as an example, if you have an issue, you can get the support logs to our support team. They can take a peek into what's happening and are much more able to actually help with regards to trying to troubleshoot what's going on internal to your application. So our new architecture rides on two pieces of technology. First, we have Docker, which allows us to package the application and its dependencies into containers. It's easily deployed utilizing a single command line instruction through Linux. And we also have Replicated. This allows deployment of the containerized SaaS applications to on-prem customers. And this is where you'll gain the value in the one-click updates and where you can create support bundles in case you need to share more information with our support team. So things aren't changing actually much for how we address our on-premises installations. We still fully test them on all supported platforms, so Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel versions, different browsers, and that kind of thing. And we also still give you the ability to deploy to a QA environment so you can validate before launch to production. You will always have the latest access to critical security patches or high severity defect fixes as soon as we release and those are available. And you'll also receive an email notification, so you don't have to monitor it if you don't want to, but if you do, you'll see them as soon as they pop up there. And also, if you need to validate for regulatory purposes, so I've worked a lot with our medical customers, and I know validation is a really huge thing. We also offer the Jama Validation Kit, which is an additional service that provides you a set of tools to help with validating Jama within your process. This helps lower the risk and cost of complying with functional safety standards. So the Jama Validation Kit, if you're interested in it, includes the Jama process document, which really tells you how we work here internally at Jama. So how do we commit code? What good practices do we have in place? It also has the Jama Safety Manual, which outlines our core workflows, the Performance Qualification Report, which outlines our testing for each release, templates for easy importing of our core workflows and test cases, now including test steps into your environment, access to a private Jama community, and then the TÜV-SÜD certificate and report for each release. This additional documentation that Jama provides also gives you the comfort of knowing you're using Jama as it's intended, and it provides insight into our processes and our own validation efforts and tracks the detailed changes of each release so it's clear when a revalidation is required and when the changes are minor enough to skip. And honestly, a lot of questions that I get from customers are, hey, I'm in the hosted environment, I don't think I can validate, or, maybe this validation toolkit isn't for me. And about half of our customers who are using the validation kit are actually in the hosted environment because they want the stability of the hosted environment, they want the lower IT overhead even more so of the hosted environment, or the quick updates and that kind of thing. And this validation toolkit allows them to look at the information that's coming out or the changes that are coming out and decide if this is something that they need to revalidate before they would let their internal users actually utilize it. And so this validation toolkit has been really valuable, again, not only for our on-prem customers, but also for our hosted customers as well. And with that, Christina, I'm going to head back to my application, and I am more than happy to answer any questions that have come up, maybe show around the application a little bit here with the few minutes that we have left.
Thanks, Jess. Now let's get started with some questions. Okay, cool. So the first one is there any plan to be able to filter the trace view by type? We can trace requirements to designs and verifications. We would like to see the trace view for requirements to verifications only.
Yeah, that's a really great question, Christina, and something that we hear relatively frequently. So it is something that we are planning on looking at. We know that you want to be able to filter down to those specific item types, and that would be useful. The mixed view obviously has uses as well. So we'll keep that, but it is in the plans at some point to add the ability to filter by item type.
Wonderful. All right, so another one about trace view. Is trace view replacing the Coverage Explorer?
Yeah, another question that we get all the time because people really, really love the Coverage Explorer. And honestly, I still use it relatively frequently as well. So at this point, we don't have any plans to replace the Coverage Explorer. They do have different uses and different use cases, and we'll continue to support both for now, unless the trace view were to become equivalent in functionality to the Coverage Explorer, in which case we might look to retire it. But if you were ever a trace matrix user, as an example, you know that we don't retire things very often because people really like specific parts of the software. So hopefully that's good news if you are a Coverage Explorer lover. Should make a bumper sticker around that.
I'm sure there are lots of fans and a mascot. So in TraceView, can you see all the pertinent relationships, or is it capped like Coverage Explorer is?
It's not capped. So it's a live scroll. So as you scroll down, everything will kind of come in to view. So if I move to either side of the source, I'll be able to see everything. The one thing to note that is that when you export, that is actually capped. So it's at 6 on either, or 6 total. So if you have like 2 levels of upstream and 7 levels of downstream, you would get the source, the 2 levels upstream, and then whatever 6 minus 3 is 3 levels of downstream.
Okay, but 6 total levels.
Yes, 6 total levels.
Is pretty good. So I'll transition to a few questions about Reading View. With the new Reading View, can you export to Word all the visible fields?
Yeah, so that was something that was really important for us to be able to do. So yes, you can export those fields. And I'm going to caveat a little bit just to say that, remember, we're 2 days out from a release. So if you are in the hosted environment or you're on our Express channel, you won't see those Reading View changes until Saturday morning, whatever time zone you're in. But after that, you'll have that capability.
Cool. So one more question then about Reading View here. I changed what fields are shown in the Reading View of Project A, system requirements. When I go to Project B, will that change still apply to the system requirements in that project?
Yeah, so this came in from one of my buddies. I guess I won't mention your name, but this was a good question that actually I didn't know the answer to. So I just tested it really quickly. And if I go from Project A to Project B, it is going to remember what it was I was looking at, which is kind of nice. So, you know, in my test, I just added the created by field, and then I went to a different project, and that created by field was still showing up in the system requirements. So that's a really nice little piece of functionality that got built in there that I can't remember if it's in list view or not.
All right. Yeah, that's actually a good question. I don't think I've played around with that either. Mm-hmm. So when you use the duplicate item function, can you configure what fields are copied?
Yeah, so what we wanted to do with the duplicate function is we wanted to get it out the door and then get feedback from you on what was important in terms of being able to duplicate certain fields. So like status, as an example, is not one that people would generally want to duplicate, but there might be other custom fields that you would want to duplicate. So for right now, we just do those basic fields of like name, description, test steps. But in the future, we'd love to add more fields. So I'm going to go ahead and give a plug to the community, because the community would be a really good place to talk about what fields you might like. Is it all fields and that kind of thing? And then the product manager who owns this line of work, he looks at that fairly frequently and would love to take that feedback. I know that he wants to add more fields to duplicate as well.
Awesome. That's a great suggestion. Start a thread and then
yes,
you know, somebody should comment on it too. So this next question, I hope you can answer it. It's kind of a specific one. So thanks, Christy, for asking this. So this was about the new Wirus equation editor. Mm-hmm. In the demo where the equation was hand-drawn, it looked like the 26 was translated as 2b. Mm-hmm. So the question is, can you go back and edit the drawn equation so that it's translated correctly?
Wow, I actually don't know the answer to that. Should we do a live test
Yeah, let's check it out.
We love to do live tests. This is where I'm glad I'm not in sales anymore because my salespeople hated this. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a new item, a new market requirement here, and we will go in and I'm just going to call it just test, which seems like a pretty good name. And then we will go into the drawing tool and I will do 2B because my B's sometimes look like 6s. We'll say okay here. And then I'm going to go ahead and double click to edit that. And it looks like I must be able to. I can edit it, but it looks like I have to redraw the entire thing. I'm betting, though, if I go into here that I can just do it this way. So the answer is yes, although it doesn't allow you to like erase your specific drawing piece. It does allow you to edit it. So the answer is yes, live test.
Wow. Okay, thank you. I'm really appreciative of that. Huh? Yeah. All right. This is a good one to demo too. So thanks, Josh, for just posting this one. When you duplicate an item, do you have to set up upstream, downstream relationships, or does that come along with doing the duplicate?
So let's go ahead and, like you said, just go ahead and live do it because I can't remember the answer off the top of my head. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this adoptability one right here. I am not going to include the attachments, links, or tags. And with the new accessibility, I'm just going to go ahead and press enter because I love that. And then when we look at relationships, there are no relationships. So it just duplicates the item's name, description, and then again, if there were test steps in there, it would duplicate those as well.
Thank you. So this one, I don't think you'll want to do a live demo, but we can answer it anyway. Will the new version history changes that are in the review center automatically update to new versions, or are you still required to do a new revision of the review?
You still have to do a new revision of the review, if I understand the question correctly.
Yes, thank you. At least I hope so, Tim. Let us know if that didn't answer it. Let's see here. Here's a good question. Thanks, James. Have any improvements been made in the reports and export views for Microsoft Word?
I'd be interested in knowing, probably in an offline discussion, because it could be a big one, about what improvements you were potentially looking for. At this point, we haven't really touched the reporting engine, but that's always something that we're looking for feedback around. So we'd love to hear that feedback either through the community like we talked about, or you can talk to your account manager, anything along those lines, or you can always reach out to me. I have a pretty open calendar. And I love to hear feedback, as Christina knows.
Yes, and we always get questions about reports and exports. So yeah, please, we can pass it on to the right people. So then next question. This one is from Shauna. We baseline approved high-level requirements, then write lower-level requirements. However, when we draft the lower-level requirements, the relationship will show on the higher level even though it is draft. Can these draft relationships be flagged in some way?
So I saw this question earlier, and I'm not 100% sure I understand it. Christina, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I asked this one as I'm like, that seems really interesting. And I wonder if other people are doing this sort of thing too. Yeah, Kathy, if you could, or sorry, Shauna, elaborate more on what you mean about drafting the lower level requirements, because we do have like versioning of relationships to some extent, but it's not in the UI. You can't click on a relationship and see its versions, but this sort of thing is tracked in baselines and you can access it via REST API. So maybe just clarify that, Shauna, and we'll see if we can answer it for you.
Yeah, if not, it's an offline conversation that we could have as well.
Sounds good. So this one, we've been talking about this new background architecture of Jama for it's been about 1.5 years since we released Jama 8. Yeah, so Stephen is wondering, and this is your BFF, do changes affect the recommended maximum items that you have in a project or any of the gates we recommend with the health report?
Yeah, so Steve, it's a really good question. There are a couple of, it's a little nuanced, right? Because depending on how big your database is, you'd want to set up a different system or a different server to ultimately handle the Jama app. So there's some of that goes into it. If anything, I think that it probably affects it in a positive way. There were some really big performance updates with the Jama 8 platform. And Steve, just knowing when you came on, you didn't really experience the old platform versus the new platform. That being said, we do have guardrails in place as well. So it hasn't changed those guardrails. I think we still say, 25,000 items in a project, Christina, something along those lines. I mean, that's certainly adjustable. But yeah, there's no, I wouldn't say that it directly affected it, at least not, Steve, in terms of how you might interact with the project, if that makes sense.
Thank you. So this next one, I'll ask a little, or I'll answer a little bit, and then I'll leave some of the question to you, Jess, because I know you have a better idea of what people's use cases are for some things. So Gina's wondering, what are some use cases where attachments are used? I've wanted to use them to attach a PDF to a requirement, but since it's not viewable in review, I don't do that. So I just wanted to clarify what that means for everybody out there. If you aren't familiar with how attachments work, that is a widget. So the widget itself is not visible in the review center. You can't send widgets to review. But you can, in the description field or other fields that you might have in an item that you send to review, you can add links, and those links can include attachments to things that are on the server. But in order to view attachments in general, you need to have permission to view everything in the project. So if you use that as a workaround, your reviewers may or may not be able to see the attachment. So the follow-up part of her question for you, Jess, is, so why and where are people using attachments in Jama?
Yeah, and I see a couple of areas where people are really using attachments in Jama. The first is on an import, if you will. So I maybe was using Microsoft Word or something along those lines before, and now I've brought all of my information into Jama, but I still want to have a place to kind of store that documentation, not necessarily in an official capacity. So if you're a medical device company, I wouldn't use us as a doc repository as an example. But maybe, I just want to know where the old Word document is, so I might attach it that way. We also have a customer that I used to work with who they're using it to attach like Visio diagrams. So they have the screenshot of the Visio diagram in the rich text editor, and then using this add attachments right here, they are actually adding that attachment to the Visio diagram. So if somebody needs the .vsd, they have that ability to jump to it. So those are kind of the big ones that I see. I personally use them for, I took a screenshot that I want to refer to within the item, or something along those lines, and that's where I would use the attachment.
Okay, thank you. So this next question, I know you're familiar with the sample data set, and I'm not sure if this question pertains to the sample data set or if it has to do with custom fields that this person's admin set up in Jama. So you can tell me if this is part of the data set or if it's likely a custom field question.
Okay.
Is the implementation field the new name for the clarifying information field?
The implementation, I don't know the reference, so I'm wondering if it's a custom field on this person's end, in which case maybe we can reach out separately and clarify.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's see. How about browser support? Have there been any changes in the past, since January with browsers?
Yeah, so we still support the big four, so Firefox, Internet Explorer, Chrome, and Safari. And we also now support Microsoft Edge. So if you're using Edge, that is now supported as well.
Cool. Thank you. So there are a lot of questions here about specific things people are wondering if we're going to be expanding on in the application or supporting soon. And I was wondering if you could just, how you give the updates to the community about what Jama's planning on working on. If you could say anything about what might be happening in the next handful of releases.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question to answer. I would say that for right now, what I can say is that there's some big changes coming, which are exciting. We're going to continue to focus on kind of our core, so looking at Reading View and Review Center and that kind of thing. Ultimately, you have to remember that at the end of the day, our goal is to make you guys happy, our customers. And so we are going to continue to refine and reinforce the functionality that you're already using in Jama, try and make it better and try and make it more Christina, the word has just whipped away from my brain. Ultimately make it more efficient for you, I guess. It's not the word I want, but yeah. That wasn't a great answer because I can't remember the word I want.
I would love to give you the correct synonym, but I was reading questions, so I don't even know what you said. All right. So yeah, it looks like the rest of the questions are just pertaining to future Jama things. So, or hey, I think you should add this post. But what we do is I think about every 8 weeks, I provide this big old list of feature requests to our product team and our UX team, and they go through those and they look for themes and identify what it is our customers are looking for in Jama. And they look at what we have planned in terms of how can we, do the best work for what our market is and everything. So Jess follows up with this post that says, hey, here's what we're planning soon. So I would recommend keeping an eye on the feature request community. Subscribe to that. If you haven't, you can choose daily or immediate notifications in the community. And if you have any questions about how those work, you can always contact me separately. Create a community account. You can send me a direct message about that. So let me see if there's anything that isn't about new features here that you could answer for us. I guess just kind of at a high level, what is it about the new architecture that's better than the old way we used to deploy Jama?
Yeah, so I don't know if you ever deployed old Jama, but it was definitely more of an obstacle course than deploying the new Jama. So a lot of the usefulness comes into play in a couple of main areas. First of all, the fact that if you have an issue, you can send a support. Christina, what's the word that we call it? It's like a bundle of information, essentially.
A support bundle.
A support bundle. I had the word. Yay. A support bundle to support that dumps essentially right from the application. So they very easily know exactly what you're looking at. And that whole process is way easier. Not that we ever have issues with our software, but if you did, that's what you would do. The other really nice thing about it is honestly just getting updates and getting everything installed. Again, we have a really nice user interface through Replicated that allows you to see, is there a new version? What is the resource constraints, or what kind of resources are you utilizing as you're running Jama on this server, that kind of thing. So those are really the big two pieces. And as somebody who literally the first week I was at Jama, I tried to install Jama and I went home and told my now husband I might need to quit because I can't figure it out. I was so happy when Docker and Replicated, when we did this thing with them to ease the install, because it was a sad time for me many years ago when I started at the old Jama. So it's much improved now.
Yeah, and I would add, as somebody who works in support and sees, questions come in about installation, the initial installation with Replicated Docker is way different than our old form of installation, where whether it was a brand new installation or an upgrade of Jama, you had to download a tar, unpack it, throw it in your Tomcat folder, settle your things in your, terminal, and do this every single time you needed to update. Now, the initial installation of Jama is way different, and it requires a different skill set because you're doing a lot more with Linux. For example, that's a requirement now, and it didn't used to be. But the upgrades are so much easier. It is so nice to be able to go into the admin console and say, wow, look, there's a new upgrade available. Click, there it is. Yeah, anyway, so that's just my experience with it. And so it looks like we have answered all the questions that are about features themselves that exist. All the rest of them are just about future plans. So like I said, go to the community to share what you want, and then to take a look at the posts about future plans of Jama. So I'll throw it back to you, Jess. Is there anything else you want to add?
Thanks to everybody for participating. And yeah, if you have questions, you know where to find us.
Cool. Thank you, Jess. And thanks all of you for joining us today. We'll be sending a short 3-question survey as you exit the webinar. And you can provide comments on today's content and topics that you would like to see covered in the future webinars. I know some of you were experiencing some audio difficulties. Thank you very much for sticking with us through that. We really appreciate it. And we also, just want to have your feedback on the webinar, so please let us know what you thought. Thank you very much for taking time with us today, and have a good one.